On today's hot sheet, I'm discussing Jerome Powell's comments yesterday on further cuts, what that might mean, as well as homeowners equity report on that and where it stands today. Today is Tuesday, October 1st. I am Byron Lazine, and the hot sheet starts now. Welcome into the hot sheet. I am live from Las Vegas. Let me know in the live chat which market you are tuning in from. Happen to be here in Las Vegas until tomorrow, when we'll be then coming back in just 2 weeks, I think. So bammania.com. If you have not gotten your tickets, we'll be back here in Las Vegas for BAM Mania. Make sure you grab your tickets. VIP is sold out. But there are general admission tickets remaining. We have a pre-party happening at Legacy Club at Circa, as well as an after party at Stadium Swim. You do not want to miss BAM Mania. Not only the speakers, but the people that you will be connected with. Get to bammania.com to grab your tickets. All right, it feels like it's been forever for me here on the hot sheet because Thursday was a big miss. We are officially into travel season. I got stuck in Atlanta for 24 hours on Thursday in the middle of that storm. I do want to say my heart goes out to everybody in the Southeast, particularly the Carolinas and Georgia. I mean, where it's hard to look at, and I know so many people that are impacted. I'm sure you do as well. And if you are personally one of those impacted, really feel for you here. And hope you get through it soon. But yeah, so Thursday was stuck in Atlanta for 24 hours, and then obviously traveling out here to the desert. Zillow Unlock is happening out here. So Jeremy, I'm assuming he did a great job yesterday, Bobby. All right, Bobby's out here for 24 hours too. We just got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Tomorrow there will be no hot sheet, unfortunately, so I will be back on Thursday in Naples. Tomorrow we are going to have to waive that show, but let's get into today's show because we have a Jay Powell day, which I couldn't be more excited about. I missed that last one, and we had some commentary from Jerome Powell and his time yesterday in Tennessee. He was speaking at the National Association for Business Economics. The headline is that he signaled for future interest rate cuts. Okay, we kind of already knew that, but they will be likely smaller than the recent move of a 0.5 point. So he doesn't say they have a certain prescript that they're following, but this is what the indication is right now. Just going to CME Group after he spoke, that kind of flipped the odds from what was previously closer to 50-50 to now 64%. At a quarter point, but their CME Group still has 35% plus chance that this is a 0.5 point cut coming in November at the next Fed meeting. Now, this is very early on and a lot can change. It's going to be, data dependent between now and that meeting on what move they actually make. But Jerome Powell led the conversation by saying our economy is strong overall. It's made significant progress over the past 2 years toward achieving our dual mandate. You hear dual mandate a lot right now of maximum employment and stable prices. Labor conditions are solid, Powell said, having cooled from the previously overheated state. Inflation is eased, and my FOMC colleagues and I have greater confidence that it is on a sustainable path back to 2%. Remember, there was almost a year ago, he said, we will start cutting when we believe we're on that sustainable path. So Jay Powell saying, hey, per plan, I am now cutting. At our meeting earlier this month, we reduced the level of policy restraint by lowering the target range for the federal funds rate by 0.5 percentage point. That decision reflects our growing confidence with an appropriate recalibration of our policy stance. Strength in the labor market. We want to keep focusing on labor. Okay, strength in the labor market can be maintained in an environment of moderate economic growth and inflation moving sustainably down to our objective. So that was his opening. He mentioned housing a couple times in the opening statement. About 3 minutes in, he said outside of housing services, core inflation is also close to its pre-pandemic pace. housing service inflation continues to decline.
Laura asks, wondering if the dock workers strike will affect this if it goes on for a while.
Bobby just interrupted me mid-sentence, which is psychotic, but I can't see the comments right now. So what was the question, Bobby?
She's wondering if the dock workers strike will have any effect on this.
The dock workers strike?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think an impact on the overall labor market. I wouldn't imagine so. Not on the overall labor market. I mean, obviously in that sector it will. Housing and services inflation continues to decline, but sluggishly. So he's talking there about what we look at when we look at these CPI reports, owners, equivalent rent, those kind of things. It's sluggish. It's we're still in the early part of that decline showing up in the data. The growth rate in rents charged to new tenants remains low. As long as it remains the case, housing services inflation will continue to decline. We've seen consecutive months over and over and over now of that rent growth remaining low. So I would imagine that since this is lagging data, that it should show up in the inflation data as continuing to decline. So those were the comments there on housing from the opening statement, but we did have some Q&A. Now, for BAMX members, when you're in your hot sheet show notes, where you get the fastest accessibility to the latest news in your hot sheet show notes, obviously we break it down here on the show, but those that are grabbing this and using it inside of their communications and inside of the messaging that they send out, particularly into their database or what have you, you'll see here that on your hot sheet show notes, you have timestamps for the video. So if you want to make content out of that, you can do that. Or if you just want to use the text, you can also do that. But here's the question from Morgan Stanley economist. Submitted a question on housing inflation. Okay, I'm sure you're so glad as well. That sounds like a little, we can't watch the video right now because we're on this hotel Wi-Fi, but it sounds like a little jab at Jay Powell. I'm sure you're glad. Sounds like how I'd start my question. Way to go, Alan. I'm going to ask it because because we haven't really talked about inflation yet. You made a great point in your prepared remarks that the 3-month annualized pace is running right around 2%. So housing inflation has been a large contributor to the overall inflation and continues to be an issue throughout the country, eroding wage gains. And although housing costs are not a dual mandate, I like that she says that in the question, because now he can't just talk about his dual mandate. Okay, housing costs, not a dual mandate. How is the housing market factored into decision making? Powell says we think of core inflation as 3 buckets: goods inflation, non-housing services, by far the biggest bucket, then housing services. That's rents. That's also owner's equivalent rent. Shouldn't be owner's equivalent rent. Side note, follow the hot sheet. You know what I'm talking about. The first 2 have looked like they've broadly speaking moved back to the pre-pandemic level. Housing inflations has not yet. And what's happened and should happen is when you increase in market rents drop to a low level, as it has, as leases turn over year upon year, you should see housing service inflation flatten out. And you are seeing that, but you're seeing it just at a sluggish pace. So again, going back to the point for Powell here, that we could be a full year away from really seeing some of that data, because he mentioned there, you see the rents turn over year over year. You sometimes you need those leases to turn over for the way they look at data. I don't know why, but this is just the way they look at data instead of looking at real-time data, for it to show up in how the Fed breaks it down. So I think it went from thinking in the beginning that this would happen fairly quickly to now thinking that the process will play out over a period of some years, 2 or 3 or 4 years. Nonetheless, as long as market rents, actual new leases are, as long as inflation in those rents, those leases relatively low, it's going to show up in housing inflations as well. My guess is it's just going to take longer and yada, yada, yada. So then you've got Zenter with a follow-up talking about the goods side of that equation. Goods are less under the control of the Fed, but we have sort of been moving back to our previous regime of deflation and good prices. Some of that is probably sluggish growth from China, but how much do you rely on goods prices being in deflation in order to help the overall aggregate inflation? And so Powell then talks about going back before the pandemic. You had mild deflation in goods, and then globalization reasons and other reasons. You look at those three buckets that he talked about. He says they produce inflation between 1.7 and 2. So that's before pandemic. So we're trying to get back to where that inflation is 2. And the combination of the three buckets is less important than the fact that you get the aggregate back. Okay. So he just pointed out that goods inflation is kind of back to where it was pre-pandemic. So that's really good news. And also non-housing. So it's really about, housing catching up from Jerome Powell. Now, that was the only, question. The follow-up didn't really address housing specifically, but that was the only question that related to housing after we saw, obviously, a pretty hefty Q&A that Jeremy had covered there about a week or so ago after the Fed meeting. I thought there was, pretty abundant amount of housing questions. Obviously, that data is back inside of BAMX if you want to dig into that. And we'll get the meeting minute notes. So this is kind of like, a conversation here, some prepared statements and Q&A that Jerome Powell did before we see minute notes. We're going to obviously have, some inflation reports here before November, but every, moment here along the way, leading up to November, we're going to cover. Now, Jerome Powell did finish here saying, or at one point, did mention the 50 basis point, and said, we do not believe that we need to see further cooling in the labor market conditions to achieve 2% inflation. And so, further cooling would, lean towards thinking, hey, they don't want to, labor market to get out of control there. 50 basis point cut would be coming. Said that they don't have a prescription for that. They're not following a certain prescription. So the more cuts are coming, but the market right now is leaning towards those being quarter point cuts. Okay, we just had a report on homeowners equity. Federal Reserve had this report come out. So this is data from the Federal Reserve, NAHB reported on it, Realtor.com as well. And the data shows that U.S. homeowners homeowner equity level has reached 72.7% of the market right now. That number is the highest level since 1958. Okay, here's the chart, which will be available for you inside of BAMX. Use code HOT to get into BAMX. Homeowners equity, a share of total market value, highest level since 1958. It reached this level in the second quarter of 2024. We saw this kind of hit earlier, I think in 20 or close to it in 21, and now highest level since 1958 at 72.7%. I mean, just think about that number for a minute in regard to like, oh, do you think prices are really going to fall? I don't know. When homeowners have 70, I mean, when homeowners had no equity, that was, or less equity, 40 on average, 46% down here in 2010. That's when prices were dropping. Okay. Because you don't have as much, room right now with owners having a lot of room. Why would prices drop? Why would somebody go and take a haircut on their home when they can, sit back? They can now with, refinances going up, they can refinance the property. I was actually at dinner last night, and somebody who owns a mortgage company is like, wow, man, refis are really picked back up for us. And he had a big smile on his face because he sees that as easy money. Mortgage guys, they think about it. But right now, low sixes, some of the, it would make more sense to go refi if you want to keep the property. If you got a higher rate with all the equity people have, then going and taking some type of loss in the home. Total mortgage debt in the U.S. Also hit a new record of 13.1 trillion. So you have a record share of equity, but you also have a record share of mortgage debt. But it also grew more slowly as home sales remained very sluggish. Of course, we're at 3.86 million on existing home sales. It's a number that I think many just couldn't even believe we'd get to with population that we're at and all of that. Mortgage debt was just up 3% from a year ago and 40% from a decade earlier. So Realtor.com goes on from this data here to say that aggregate homeowner equity is at a new high of the 35.1 trillion for the quarter. That's up 10% from a year ago and triple what it was 10 years ago. So another way to look at that is this equity is up triple from what it was 10 years ago. It's a staggering number. The growth in total equity reflects a combination of rising home values, expansion of homeowner housing stock with new construction, and the growing share of homes that are owned outright by basically aging baby boomers, and they fully are paying off their mortgages. Remember, 40% of owner-occupied homes in the country are mortgage-free, another high since 2005. So homeowners have the highest share of equity since the 50s, when homeownership rate was significantly lower, and VA and FHA were not really a thing, those type of loans. So you've got the highest share since 2005 of cash-owned owner-occupied homes. You've got the biggest equity since the 50s, and homeowners continue to be in a very strong position. There's not much reason for a homeowner today, to take a haircut, even in the places where you see inventory going up. We'll continue obviously to monitor that throughout the winter and see, how far. We know seasonality is going to have an impact on pricing, but how much will it actually do, and will it be more in some of those higher inventory levels? Okay, 10-year today coming in at 3.7 on 10-year, 3.711. 30-year came in yesterday a little bit higher than where we'd love to see it, a little bit higher than where it's been, 6.24 on the 30-year fix. Remember, most of, when we were down at 6.1, day before Jerome Powell spoke, it was like, hey, buyers, this is priced in. Just because Jerome Powell is going to get up there and take some questions doesn't mean you're going to see further reduction. In fact, we've seen the 30-year go back up a little bit. So 6.24 still, we'll take that. I'd love to see that trend back down again, obviously, towards the sixes. Make sure that you grab your tickets to BAM Mania. I'll be right back here in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow, I'll be arriving, and we will have October 17th is the VIP session, October 18th, general admission, October 17th, that Thursday, we have a little kickoff party, and then the 18th is general admission and a closing party. We have Neil Dingra coming as well as Sharon Srivatsa, Chelsea Pites. I'll be doing a fireside chat with Notorious ROB and all things that are happening from a legal perspective in the industry. Luke Cree, Ricky Caruth, Tom Toole, Eric the Broke Agent, Sheila Reddy, Chris Benjamin, Lisa Chinati, amongst others, speaking, as well as just, when I look at the attendee list, I'm like, man, this room is just full of people who are really changing this industry, moving it forward. So agents of change, make sure you grab your ticket, bammania.com. BAMX members, you have your discount code for that. You can email jill@nowbam.com if you've got any questions on that and what that looks like. Also, obviously, no hot sheet tomorrow. We got a bump tomorrow with me getting out of here, but we will be back on Thursday, and we have the major announcement with Zudelio for BAMX members. So make sure, pay attention to that. That announcement, I'm hearing, is going to happen to kick off next week. So Zudelio and BAMX major announcement coming as early as next week. So stay tuned for that. All right. That is your hot sheet here for today. We will have a new Real Word pod up later here on the main channel. If you're getting value, hit that like button, subscribe. I'll see you over on the Real Word later today. Until then, toodaloo.